attendees. You want to select all panelists and attendees so that other attendees can see your messages, and it helps connect the comments and answers given by our panelists today. So it looks like we're also set up on YouTube. So welcome to those on the YouTube side. For everyone with us, you are listening in, and those that are with us in Zoom, you can type in the chat, but no microphone or video for the attendees with us. So Judy, go ahead and take down that screen share when we get a chance. I will then spotlight Hector. And Hector, as usual, I will start the recording. So just give it a couple seconds and take it away.
All right, we'll get started. So hello, everybody out there. My name is Hector Verdugo. I'm the Senior Vice President of Admissions here at Academy of Art University in San Francisco, California, USA. I see, once again, as always, we have people from all over the planet over here. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're really excited tonight. This should be a really cool workshop. This is Learn from an Expert, how to create keyframe paintings for film and for video games. So I see in the chat here, we have a lot of people already getting started, but I'm just gonna go ahead and point a couple things out if you just joined us. Right here in the middle of your screen, you're gonna see the chat button. Make sure that when you click that, you're adjusting to all panelists and attendees. I'm gonna be in the chat tonight. My goal is gonna be to help you and answer your questions, make sure that we're engaging with you. I will be more than happy to basically ask the stars of our show tonight some questions from you from the chat. So I want to make sure that it's interactive and ensure that you guys all have a good time tonight. You learn some cool stuff. So before we get started, a couple things I just want to address is that, you know, one of the things I notice on our workshops is that students ask a ton of questions about software. So even though software is a critical tool in some cases, what I want to do is just make sure that when you're taking a look at the work that's being done, just understand that the two presenters that are going to be joining us tonight, they're professionals. They've worked a really long time on their skill set to get to this level. And so software are going to be considered tools. What we really want to do is make sure that people just understand the dedication, the hard work, the thought, all of the training that it takes to get to these levels. So I just want to make sure that when we go into software questions, that even though it is helpful to understand what they're using and why they're using it, that the essence of what we're capturing tonight is that it's really just a dedication and a lot of hard work to get to that level. So a couple things I want to do before we get started is I want to make sure that everybody out there knows what events are coming up here. As you know, we're doing events all the time here at the Academy. So if there are any international students in the chat really quick, if you take a quick second off on the chat, I'm going to drop a link for everybody. If any students are out there international and you'd like to join, we're going to have an event tomorrow at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. This is called Moving Forward in Uncertain Times. It's actually going to be held by Nicholas Villarreal. He's a very successful visual developer. He's the director of our visual development program. He also is an alumni, so he's an international student from Argentina. He's going to be telling a little bit about his story about coming here as an international student. So if there's any students out there that are international that'd like to check that out, I just sent the link to RSVP for that event tomorrow. I think it'd be well worth your time to check it out. And then if there's any students out there that are high school seniors, I do not have an RSVP link quite yet, but I'm just going to throw this out there so you can put it on your calendar. We're going to have an event that's really just dedicated towards seniors that are basically joining, like class of 2020. You're trying to figure out what you want to do for college. We're going to be talking a little bit about what that process looks like for you and how to pick your college and what that process looks like if you do want to attend the Academy. And if you end up not choosing the Academy, it's okay. I hope that some of these tips on how to pick a good college are going to be useful for you anyway. So feel free to join us with that. So I'll go ahead and quit talking so I don't want to bore everybody to death, but what I'd like to do is make sure that I introduce the stars of our show tonight. So we have two wonderful artists here helping us out. First I'm going to introduce is Elena Winas. She's a concept artist based in Los Angeles, where I was born and raised, currently working for DreamWorks Animation on the upcoming CG animated series Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous. Previously, she worked in the AAA game industry. Some of her recent studios experience include working at Telltale Games as an environment concept artist on the Walking Dead series and Minecraft The Story Mode series. She's also worked as an independent designer for clients such as Activision Toys, for Bob for the Spyro Reignited trilogy, Ascendant Studios, Network, Ubisoft San Francisco, and more. And also we're going to have Vincenzo Barkasy. He's an alumni from 2016 here from the Academy of Arts. So he's very well established in the San Francisco Bay Area right now. He is a multidisciplinary designer with expertise in conceptual art, illustration, and digital communications. Currently a senior concept artist at Sledgehammer Games in Foster City, Vincenzo has launched several acclaimed AAA franchises as concept artists, including the recent game Shadow of Tomb Raider and the upcoming Marvel's Avengers. He's worked as a creative consultant for numerous Fortune 500 corporations, including Samsung, ESPN, and Marvel Entertainment. His work has been featured in national and international publications, including Graphics, Titan Books, and Ballistic Publishing. So without further ado, everybody, once again, my name is Hector Verdugo. I'm the Senior Vice President of Admissions. I'm going to be here in the chat to answer your questions and make sure that we have a wonderful workshop. I'm going to pass this off to Vincenzo here to get us started. So see you guys all in the chat.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Vincenzo, like Hector just mentioned. I'm a senior concept artist at Sledgehammer Games. And today I'm going to show you guys how to do keyframe paintings, specifically geared around live action and video game development. In sort of just a little bit of a brief overview, I'm going to talk about my experience. I am an alum from the Academy of Art. So I'm going to tell you about my experience, a little bit my journey, the work I do, and how I've gotten to where I've gotten, just so you guys get into context of what I do and what this demo is going to be associated around. So let me share my screen real quick so you guys can see some stuff. So kind of like the demo has kind of been talking about, a lot of this stuff is going to be using a lot of different types of software, which I use in my day-to-day work, but also what I'm going to show in this demo, which is a combination of Photoshop mixed with Zbrush, which is a 3D modeling software, and Keyshot, which is a rendering software to get these renders that I have here. What I'm showing you right now is a little bit of a collection of my personal art that I do outside of my professional work. And these are all just exercises, again, that I do to keep my skills sharp at work and also to practice and learn new things. So as you can see right here, there's a combination of quite a bit of things in here, a lot of photo manipulation, digital painting tools, and 3D tools. I got some prop designs here to show you, which is also a tool that I use in ZBrush to create this type of stuff. Creature designs, environments. And I'm going to show you my workflow basically from start to finish and how I conceptualize these type of environments in this demo today. Some of my work, and then this is the front page image. Just so that you guys have a little bit of a background on me. Again, like I said, I was an alum from the Academy of Art. I originally studied graphic design, and while I was at the Academy, I worked as a graphic designer where I learned typography, logo design, and other sort of skill sets around branding. And then about halfway through my studies, I realized that I always liked to draw and always loved painting, drawing, and designing worlds. And so I realized that halfway through my studies that I wanted to switch. And right when I switched, the visual development department was just starting. It's actually a pretty new department. And so I actually transitioned, never actually left the Academy, continued my studies and started learning how to do this type of stuff, which is a lot of world building type of stuff. So from there, I graduated and I started working at Crystal Dynamics about 4 or 5 months out of school. They're known for the Tomb Raider franchise. That is where I learned a lot of these sort of tools. We've been working with other environment artists and other artists who work at Crystal Dynamics. They taught me a lot of skill sets to do this type of stuff. And then from there, I went actually back to the Academy to teach where I currently do. I teach an environment design class here along with some other stuff, and also work at Sledgehammer Games as a senior concept artist. I also want to introduce Elena here so she can talk a little bit about her background too before we get started on the demo. And I'm going to show you a little bit of her work too, just so you get an idea of the type of stuff that she creates.
Thank you. So Vincenzo actually is driving this presentation at the moment, so hey, that's not the right order, dude.
Oh, it's not.
Nah, it's all good.
Technical difficulties.
No, it's all good. But hi guys, my name is Oleta. I'm a concept artist slash biz dev artist at DreamWorks Animation right now, and we're working on Jurassic Park Camp Cretaceous. I don't know if any of my teammates are here right now, but shout out, seriously, super good team. So my background is mostly in games. I just recently moved to animation here in LA. I've been in games since 2009. My first job was in 2K Games. I think it was like 2 weeks out of school. I was super lucky. And I did some work for MLB 2K10, the game, as a concept artist / texture artist, and then moved on to mobile games, which is, there's some samples of it here. And after that, I think the highlight of some of my career is when I moved to Telltale around 2017. And I think you guys heard from Hector, I worked on the Walking Dead series and Minecraft. That's one of it from Minecraft. I did a lot of keyframe and color key and lighting for Minecraft Story Mode Season 2. And after that, I think you guys have heard that Telltale did have a giant layoff, which is super unfortunate. There's a ton of really amazing people, and you know what, thankfully they've all moved to like amazing studios. Some of them probably are with Vincenzo right now in Sledgehammer. And I went full freelance after that, and work mostly in Blue Sky development. So basically when you guys are looking at games and IPs, Blue Sky is what they call the period of time where everyone's just trying to figure out like, hey, what are we gonna do right now? What does this game look like? That was 2 years of my career, basically, working with AAA clients and some indie game clients. And then late 2019, I just got a text and my art director was like, hey, do you want to try out for Jurassic? And I was like, whoa. And then 5 days later, I'm in LA. Virtual. Awesome. Well, and then I moved to LA, and then COVID happened, but it's all good. Hopefully you guys will like the TV show when it's out. But yeah, as Pete said, Vincenzo is highlighting right now. That's a color key / lighting piece from Minecraft. And you guys could see all of this work in my website. And if anyone has any questions on both the works, I'm sure that Vincenzo can answer as well. Oh, by the way, just to also highlight this, so Vincenzo's going to be really busy with the demo, and he's going to narrate his side. I'm going to be monitoring the chat, and we'll try to facilitate any questions that you guys have for both of us. So if he's like paying attention to the monitor, I'll look at the chat and be like, oh, hey, there's this question, and then we'll bring it up. So if there's anything that you guys want to ask about our backgrounds or like just the stuff that we're working on.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Elena. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Cool. All right, guys. So let's get started with the demo. I want to kind of give you a little bit of an introduction of what keyframe paintings are, because I think some people might be new to what that actually is. A keyframe painting is generally done within the pre-production sort of development cycle of a IP. So either it's a film or a game. Generally speaking, keyframes are a story moment or cinematic moments, as some people like to call it, where we usually display a design, but also tell a story at the same time. It's kind of a multi-purpose sort of way of designing. I like to do it particularly in my work because not only does it showcase design, which is the most important thing, but it also showcases lighting and storytelling all in kind of package. And we'll be talking a little bit more in detail about how you can showcase your designs and what's an effective way also to present that stuff as well. So let's get started with the demo real quick. Also, I'm noting that there is an interesting question that someone just asked that I'm going to definitely bring out sometime. Okay. There's a really interesting question. Go ahead. Let's answer it.
Oh, someone was asking like, how do we handle our workflow and how do you stay productive and creative despite burnout possibilities?
Oh, we're getting to those questions early on.
Yeah, man. Good question, by the way. Whoever asked that was actually.
That's a great question, and it's a really important one actually that I feel like doesn't get touched on enough. Really, the most important aspect of preventing burnout is having balance in your life. It's something I will say from my own personal experience. I've experienced burnout several times, and I've only been working in the industry for about 3 or 4 years, and that just comes from basically working too much and not giving yourself enough time to live life and do things that you enjoy outside of just art. Also, I think you've probably heard this before, but watching movies, playing video games, or doing any activity that inspires you will also, not only will it facilitate better art for you to create, but it'll also recharge your batteries too at the same time. Does that kind of answer the question? I think so.
Yes, and
Cool.
on my side, I've been working for, oh my God, I hit a decade. Lots. I just got burned out last month actually, and it's, I think the same with Vincenzo. I think one of the things that is super important for you guys to know is if you're going to survive in this career, and hopefully Vincenzo agrees, you have to kind of treat yourself as a professional athlete. At a certain point, I think you can totally do the Red Bull, coffee, metal music, what have you. I've done that, but it won't really last for a long time. I mean, at some points you do have to just like put yourself on the gas pedal. You know, some of the projects that we're working on is really intensive, and I've done the 5 project stack, 14-hour days, all the horror stories. But in regards to the question of like, how do you prevent burnout? Definitely take care of yourself as much as possible. You know, eat well if you can, however you can. Sleep well if you can. Exercise is super important, and I'm sure all of you guys have heard this like a million times, but we're gonna reiterate it again. In terms of preventing burnout and then also making sure that you're creative, I think when you guys are students, it's super important to remember why you guys got into art, or some of you guys who are not are interested in doing art schools like Academy of Art. Just remember why you chose to do it. It's a big decision, you know. And some of you guys are definitely going to be some of our peers someday in the future. So when you get to our step, remember this time and remember why you guys bothered to do this. Was that too long of an answer? Sorry.
No, you definitely answered it very, very thoroughly though, which is great.
Oh, how do you prevent injuries on hands or arms?
Draw with your arm, not your hand. So draw with your whole arm. That would be the advice I would have. And also take breaks.
Compression braces.
Yes. All right, so let's kind of get going so that we have this demo kind of started. This is a work in progress image I want to show you guys. This is actually, oddly enough, if you guys seen the banner image for this event, this is the same exact design, just showcased in a different sort of perspective and lighting. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today, is mostly on the design aspect of things. As you know, or may not know, concept designers, our job is to design stuff. We are world builders and we create stuff beyond just an illustrator, which is someone who just narrates stories based on scripts and other sort of supplementary information. We as designers come up with what the design looks like beyond just the storytelling. So as you can see right here, I want to showcase you guys how you can take one asset that you've created and duplicate or create several illustrations out of them to use for production sort of work and also to present to directors. So as you can see right here, this is a work in progress image of a keyframe painting showcasing this monolithic building structure. But before we get to this, the next thing that we usually do, or the first step actually, before we even get to this step, is to go through the sketch phase. And I'm going to kind of show you what that looks like. So as you can see, there's kind of a big difference between the two, right? We have a more polished painting, but right here, you can see we have the sketch phase. And this is actually, oddly enough, the most critical phase of the process, even more so than the later stages. This is where you can stay a little bit looser and come up with ideas and kind of let your brain sort of free flow design without being bogged down by details, which is something that really kind of tends to happen when you get towards this stage where you start focusing on all the little details you see there. This is the stage where you can really be creative. And generally within a production, you're usually tasked to do around a dozen or so of these before you actually commit to a final painting. And as you can see right here, this is a pretty loose sketch. We're not doing anything tight, or I'm not focusing on details. I'm purely just focusing on the overall big shapes and the overall graphic composition. And also the same shape language. Shape language is something that's really important with design. Shape language basically means the similarities in design to make it sort of more cohesive. So you can see here, I have a big round shape. I have a series of them so that they feel all intertwined together and feel like they are packaged as one complete element. And this is, I'll go through again about a dozen of these before I commit to one. And what I usually look for before I can go to the next step is, how is all the elements working in the shot? Is it conveying the correct mood? Meaning, does it have the right lighting to sell the type of space that we want? Does it have the right kind of design? Is it have functionality, which is also really important? Is this a space where someone can build this later on in a pipeline? So if it's for a film, can this set be actually built? Is it possible? If it's for a game, is this a place where we'd want players to walk around and explore? And then just from an artistic standpoint, are all the fundamentals there? So is the scale correct? Is the lighting correct? If there's characters in it, is the anatomy correct? This is kind of the stage where you do all the dirty work, basically. And then from this stage, once we go there, I usually jump straight into 3D, just so that I can build out some rough shapes, just to kind of figure out what the overall structure is going to look like from a more three-dimensional perspective and less from like a 2D perspective. I'll show you that real quick. Is there any questions also with the sketch phase? Aletta, do we have any questions about that?
Not paused, but I want to just also underline what Vincenzo already mentioned, which is silhouettes is super important. The thing is, it's super, you know what, the thing is, I actually listened to a bunch of lectures this morning, and a lot of pros right now are talking about how if you get caught up in 3D, it's super hard to get yourself out of that hole of like, oh, I'm using a software. I'm sure a lot of you guys are like, oh my God, I gotta learn ZBrush. Oh my God, I gotta learn Blender. Oh my God, all this yada yada. But Vincenzo got it right. Basically, if you start with sketches, you're just trying to get your ideas out on paper and making sure that it works before you're even getting into this point. And like what Hector was mentioning earlier, which I thought was a really good point too, is that it's really hard to separate yourself from all these softwares when you see the industry like being driven by all these tech changes. But honestly, I think a lot of it is just understanding what you're trying to do with the software. And Vincenzo can definitely like follow up on this while he's demoing. It's all about getting what is in our brains into the screen in the fastest way possible.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for answering that too, Aletta. And I kind of want to piggyback off of what she just said, which is about designing. These are all tools. And if you've ever taken a class with me, any of my previous students are in this chat right now. I've always talked about tools as just an asset to facilitate in what you're designing. The big, most important thing about anything you are working on as a concept artist is the design. Is it functional? Does it make sense in the context of the story? And is it an appealing looking design above all else? Everything else that you use, 3D software, Photoshop, photos, rendering software, these are all tools that we use to help get the job done more efficiently. And that's basically the focus I'm trying to show you guys here, is that what I'm using here are just tools to get the job done more efficiently, as opposed to going through it in a more painstaking sort of process, right? So kind of going back to what we have here, I'm opening up Zbrush, and this is actually the scene that we have here. This is the 3D blockout that I created from that sketch. As you can kind of see here, it's a lot of actually very crude modeling. Although there's a lot of detail and it seems like it's very busy, there's actually not too much happening. And what I actually used here is a lot of duplicated parts from different models and just kind of mashed them together. It's a technique we call kit bashing. A lot of concept artists use this technique to quickly generate new ideas. I like to use the analogy of Lego building blocks. I'm sure all of you have heard of Lego or played with Lego before, but the concept is basically when you buy Legos, you're given a bunch of different pieces from a kit. And what you're doing here basically is pulling out the individual pieces from that kit to build something else with. So that's another thing to kind of look at as tools, right? So if you look at this whole thing here, there's actually a lot of duplicated pieces from other parts. Like this part is actually duplicated and put in front of here. These pieces are actually from different models. I duplicated this piece and moved it over here. So again, just to kind of help save some time and also save time from modeling things from scratch, because again, the purpose here is to take this into a rendering software and then Photoshop paint over. So a lot of that stuff's actually going to get covered up. And I'm going to show you a kit that I've been using. It's from a website called Kitbash 3D. They have very high quality pieces that they sell on the internet for conceptual designers and map painters in the film and game industry. And basically a lot of this stuff, you can see I'm pulling different elements, like different pieces from this part to make up these type of things. If I were to go down here, I can actually pull off different sections of this model, right? So I can actually, almost like a Lego building block, pull elements that I could want to use over here into my piece here and come up with something different. Right, so if I wanted that to be a centerpiece right there. And again, as you can kind of see, I'm trying to keep the same design language here. I have a very circular sort of shape language, and I want to make sure I keep that within the final design. So when I'm picking out pieces here, I'm making sure to find pieces that kind of follow that shape language and making sure that they all match cohesively together. So see, I picked that piece from there. You know, maybe I want a giant floating sphere because that's really popular.
Giant floating sphere. It's always cool.
Giant floating spheres. I see. So
yeah, you could put hexagons on it. You could put squares on it. It doesn't have to be a boring a sphere.
No, it doesn't. And you can do the great thing about and the great thing about 3D too is that if you don't like it, you can just erase it or get rid of it. You don't have to stick with it. So unlike using something like you painted in Photoshop, you're kind of stuck with what you have to an extent, especially if you don't use layers, just paint on one layer. Now you got to repaint over that. With this, it's a little bit more of a designing on the fly sort of approach. So if I wanted to use this piece right here to kind of facilitate that dome piece, and I can duplicate that one. So now I can use it here. And again, I'm just doing this stuff just to make it a little bit more faster. I could sit here and model stuff from scratch, but our job here as concept designers is not 3D modelers in the traditional sense where we're building things from scratch and moving and texturing stuff. We're just using these as tools to paint on top of later, right? Now I'm going to find, there is one piece in here that I want to change. Let me try to find it. In the case right here, I can find this piece.
Really interesting question from Stella. Do you ever recognize assets used in other video games / movies from the kits? So
Yes.
I'll let you in on a secret. There are actually automatic trees available online. And that is purely because we do not have the bandwidth to design every single tree in the world. I mean,
Yes.
Spoiler alert, we do have trees in Jurassic Park, and sometimes it's true. I mean, we want the best designs to come out on assets that matter. So like what Vincenzo was saying with Kitbash 3D is it really just frees out bandwidth to think about the designs that matter. And sometimes, I mean, not to discount the fact that you can get like the star of the show through Kitbash 2 if you design it really well. But a lot of it is basically a shortcut thing so we can design better things, if that makes sense.
Right. And kind of like what you were saying there, it's like, and going back to also what I was saying before, is they're just tools. We're just using them as building blocks. We're not using the models one-to-one. We're just pulling pieces from them because they're already been created for us.
Also, another really good question. Is learning 3D necessary to be competitive in getting concept art job, or can you survive on knowing just 3D? I mean, sorry, just 2D.
Depends on which industry you want to be a part of. I will say if you want to lean more towards the live action film realm, that 3D is almost critical. And actually with the new implementation of Unreal Engine, especially in The Mandalorian, if anyone's seen that show, it's almost utilized almost 100%. I don't know a ton of artists on that show that you don't use 3D in some way. So 3D is becoming the new sort of realm for doing concept designs, specifically in the film and AAA game development.
Yeah, and to add on that, I think, again, it really depends because there's just different types of jobs available. The stuff that we're doing right now, the things that Vincenzo is demoing, the stuff that I'm saying, it's particular to the things that we've done in our careers and the things that we were exposed to. I actually have a lot of friends who still just do 2D and they don't do too much 3D. It really depends. I would say, like what Vincenzo was saying, if you're trying to get into specific productions and they're very 3D heavy, then there's no way around it. They will not hire you specifically because they want that. They need that. It has nothing to do with your talent, has nothing to do with what you're capable of artistically. It has more to do with that particular production needs a 3D person or 3D concept artist, basically. And sometimes you can get away with just using 3D very minimally, and I've seen that in some productions. So yeah, the question is just depends on what you guys want to do for your career.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I'll say I have a little bit of a story behind that, but I actually went to Comic-Con one year to go look for work, and they had a production designers in Hollywood panel. After the panel, I went and talked to a couple of the production designers, which in case you guys don't know, production designers are the people in the film realm that hire concept artists. And one production designer I talked to, after he looked at my work, the only question he asked me is, do you know 3D? Literally didn't ask any other question. So that also goes to show you how important 3D has been in sort of these sort of pipelines. Now, I will say though, just kind of as a little bit of a caveat there, in game development, that's not as much of a case. There is less of a need for 3D stuff there in terms of like the assets and stuff that concept artists have to create, but it doesn't actually hurt at all. And it's definitely turning into a trend now to use more of that stuff.
Yeah, and to also add to that, I would not have gotten my job at Jurassic if I don't know 3D. We're basically closer to concept modeling at this stage, and I work with some really amazing people, honestly. Not to, I mean, I know my team, if they're here, probably laughing at me right now. All of them are super capable people, but so to add to that, some of them actually don't know 3D when they first started. They've told me this story, and they picked it up immediately. Seriously, don't let your hesitance get in the way of getting these types of jobs. Like, you can actually learn on the job if it's possible, or just tell yourself like, hey, I'm actually going to do one thing at a time. You know, learn how to control rotate tool and Zbrush first, and then do all the complex stuff. You don't have to jump in and think like, oh my God, I got to do what Vincenzo's doing right now, like tomorrow. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, correct. Totally. It's just like learning any other type of software. It takes a little bit of time to get used to it, but once you get used to the interface and how things kind of work, then you'll pick it up pretty quickly.
Yeah, actually I have a dumb story to add to that because I'm not a Zbrush main, I'm actually a Maya main. So there was a point where I'm like, why the heck isn't my model working? And then it's like, you just forget to put on edit. I know you're probably laughing at me right now, but it's true. And these things happen.
Hey, go ahead. What were you saying, Elena?
There's quite a few questions with people that are 2D, just saying, hey, what's good advice to get started in 3D?
Well, I would pick up I think the first thing I would do is I would really narrow down what kind of 3D software you want to learn and what you want to get out of the software, because it can get really overwhelming going through a lot of software and trying to figure out what you want out of it. Like if you look into Maya, for example, it can do everything. And I think a lot of students, from at least my own students and people I've talked to, they get overwhelmed by all the possibilities of what the software provides. And I think you got to really just sit down and think about what you really want to get from that. So in the case of, for me, when I do concept modeling, I'm not interested in doing UV texturing or baking maps or doing any sort of animation stuff. So learning Maya is probably not a very efficient tool for me to use, as opposed to something like Zbrush, where it can handle high poly count, and it's more like sculpting with clay as opposed to like traditional polygon modeling. So I would say that's one, to answer part of that question, that's what I would do. But then I'd also look into some of the free software. Blender right now is a very good one to pick up. There's a lot of tutorials online that are really good from industry pros, and it's free, which is like the most amazing thing you could possibly ask for in a 3D program, because they all usually are subscription based.
Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with just choosing something and going with it. Like, you guys have heard what Vincenzo was saying, like everyone's saying like Blender is the path to future, and I don't disagree with that. I'm actually trying to learn Blender and Substance in between ZBrush and Maya. And you know, honestly, I know this sounds really weird, but probably the first software you pick up can probably be like the one that works for you. Or you could be like, oh my God, I really hate this interface. It's not working for me. Then just jump. Um, there might be some productions that will say, we do need someone who can work with ZBrush. In our production's case, we do work with Maya quite a bit, but there's people who learn Blender. People use ZBrush and 3ds Max. There's all kinds of things. It really just depends on what kind of work you guys want to do. If you want to work more organic, like creature design, that's ZBrush. You will not do that in Maya. Please don't. That's a lot of work. If you want to do organic pieces in Maya, that I don't really suggest that.
Yeah, that's actually a great thing to point out too, Aletta, is that some 3D softwares are catered to different types of stuff. ZBrush is very good with doing organic sculpting. So if you're interested in creature design, or you're interested in sculpting organic sort of rocky environments or trees, anything organic based, it's the best tool out there for that type of stuff. It's not actually, oddly enough, what I'm using it for. It's not the best program for doing this type of stuff, just because of the way that the tools are built. But you know, just kind of like going back to what I was saying earlier, it doesn't really matter the tool. Like, it's just more of a matter of preference and how you can kind of leverage it for what you want to do with it.
Yeah, and maybe this is very, very industry specific, but for example, in our show, Maya actually is the main tool for DreamWorks, and it actually helps a lot if you know that program in particular, because then everything scales to that software. If I know, not a lot of people might know this, but if you port from Maya to ZBrush, then suddenly your scale is off, or like 3ds Max to ZBrush, suddenly like something happens. Now the thing is, that's very, very, very production specific. So I wouldn't try to like predict the future, or like, oh my God, maybe I'll end up in a studio somewhere where this might happen to me. Like, you guys won't really know that. It's better to just think about what kind of work you guys want to do, and then try to see if there's a software you can be comfortable doing. Because at the end of the day, like, don't forget that we're anchoring all of this to just getting a really good design and just trying to get everyone amped up about the production. Like, no one ever saw my model and go like, oh my God, that rock would have been so much better if you had done it in 3ds Max versus Maya. Although they might say like, okay, that looks like low poly, go throw it in ZBrush and start over. And I'm like, okay, that's true. By the way, spoiler alert, we also have rocks in Camp Cretaceous.
Yay, yay rocks.
I promise there are dinosaurs. Another question, does Pixar use Maya? I think they do. They also use other things, but they do use Maya, yes. And we're not sure if any of these programs will be phased off. For at any point in the game, honestly, there could be an announcement tomorrow where they're going to be like, hey, there's this like other program like XYZ that's like even better than any of these things combined. And then we're going to be like, oh my God, let's learn XYZ. And we will. Are you going to learn XYZ, Vincenzo?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I'm
just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
So you're like, no, I'm too attached.
No, I so, you know, there's a lot of people in the community that like to jump on the I like to call it the technology bandwagon, whatever the most popular 3D, 2D tool that's out there, like to jump on and try it. I like to always assess every tool I use and see if I can actually find it useful and have it supplement to my current workflow, as opposed to learning something completely new. That's also something to kind of think about when you're looking to learn something new, is if you already know a specific skill set, like for me, I know ZBrush, learning new software, I'm always looking to find ways where that can supplement back into ZBrush, as opposed to learning something completely different that's not in tandem with my current workflow that I'm familiar with.
Hey, Aletta and Vincenzo, either one of you want to take this, but if you want to speak to, say, software versus, skill set and understanding design, I think a lot of times we get questions about software and recommendations, but do you guys want to maybe speak to maybe the difference of being a designer versus someone that knows software?
Oh yeah, I actually saw a lot of that question about, well, I'll get in.
Do you want to answer that question, Aletta? I can supplement whatever you're saying with that one.
Yeah, so the difference between being a designer versus someone who's software specific, I mean, honestly, if you choose to be a tech artist, then that will be the difference. And a tech artist means that you are the person that the production relies on to basically troubleshoot the software, try and figure out what kind of proprietary tools can work. You're focusing on the software as a production tool and a way to problem solve, versus we're using the software to solve design issues. This is all design issues versus like, oh, hey, let's use this program over that program. That's really not the point. And for example, what Vincenzo is showing here right now, this looks super technical and a bunch of you guys might be looking at this be like, what the heck? But think about the possibility. Think about the fact that someday you might be tasked to do an architecture keyframe for Marvel. And they will be like, hey, we want to make like Wakanda 2.0. And then you're going to be given one day to do it. And then you're going to be like, oh my God, that's insane. And that's when the software can help you, which is what Vincenzo actually demoing. Sorry, Vincenzo, I'm giving spoiler alerts.
That's okay. No, it's perfect.
But yeah, like we're solving design issues. And a lot of it has to do with sometimes the design looks best when it's rendered really well to sell that, basically that visual and that experience to everyone else in the production. It gets them excited about the work. And that actually is part of your job as a designer / concept artist. You're there to give them the vision that they want. The directors / the writers, art directors, creative directors, what have you, they're basically the ones who are asking you to do these designs. And we basically start with scripts, for example, or just like game briefs, and they're going to be like, hey, we want you to design this thing and this thing and this thing. And it's always going to be something interesting. I mean, you guys wouldn't really want to watch something that's boring or not interesting. And so part of our job as a designer is like, okay, we're trying to come up with the best possible version for this design, such as the one that Vincenzo is designing, and coming up with the design that'll support the story, because story and gameplay matters a lot. If not, that's the number one thing that you need to worry about. And that is the biggest difference. That's what we're serving. We're basically serving the story, the gameplay, the stuff that gets you guys excited. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but there's a tech nerdiness to it where we're like, oh my God, I just found out this new tool in Maya. This true story. I just found out a tool in Maya that literally just figures out the middle point to everything. And I'm like, I could have used that like 6 months ago, seriously. And I'm like, oh my God. But that's just stuff that helps you get there. It's not the final results. And sorry if that's kind of long-winded, but I feel like that's like a big deal.
No, totally. Kind of like what I was mentioning earlier. We're just designers and we're using tools to help facilitate our vision in the most efficient way possible. So in the case of what I'm doing right now, if I were to do this traditionally, plotting points in Photoshop, this would take forever. And when you have a deadline that's really quick, like a quick turnaround of only like a day or 2 days, you're going to spend a whole day just plotting points before you even start designing. So doing stuff in 3D helps shortcut that stuff so that you're spending more time focusing on the design and less on fundamental type of stuff, right?
Well, so here's the thing. He's saying that because he already knows your
That's true.
Your fundamentals. So I'm like, dude.
That is true. You should still learn fundamentals. I'm not saying that fundamentals are something that you should not have. You definitely should learn them. And the school is very good at teaching that type of stuff. And it definitely will help you in the case of when you work, because what ends up happening is you apply the fundamentals, which I'm going to show you later, in the paint over aspect of it. So learning how to adjust lighting, composition, perspective, all the traditional stuff, that's where all those sort of skills are utilized. This is just kind of like your building block, as you may say, that you're going to paint over.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And there's actually a thing that I could share with you guys that changed my mindset from 2D to 3D. My current art director, he is also my mentor, and so he gave me this tip one time. He's like, you know what? You already know how to design some stuff. Like, you already know how to make a tire. So if you can just do that in 3D, then you can actually design other stuff. Or like, you know, I've proven that I can paint rocks. No one's gonna ask me to just paint 10 rocks in a day. That's a complete waste of our time and the production bandwidth. So sometimes you're just like, okay, 3D rocks, we're done. And that lets you design the stuff that actually matters, like the character props, the set designs, the things that are actually like requiring more of a brain power to do. And I think I already said that earlier in the demo too. So
yeah, no, that's great.
So yeah, I mean, the fundamental, and that's what I'm saying, is that Vincenzo already knows his deal. Like we don't really crutch on 3D as much for fundamentals, because if you don't understand how to do compositions, yeah, you can luck into it. We do that. Or you're gonna move the camera on and be like, oh, I like this. Or, you know, accidental designs happen where you're like, oh, that shape looks cool. That absolutely 100% happens. But I think when you're designing for something that's functional, then you do need to know your fundamentals. Like, for example, does this scale work? Does this thing fit together? Like, what shape is more dominant? Quick reads is also a huge deal. You only get a certain amount of time when you're watching TV, shots, scenes, what have you. And that time is super valuable to get your point across. So for example, I could tell from this model that Vincenzo's designing something that's epic, that looks like high tech, with some architectural specifics that look pretty modern. And that's something that we learn from fundamentals and just designing. It's not something that you get necessarily from the 3D software. Like, I don't think you can bumble your way into that, I think.
No, totally.
Hey guys, I have a question from Hensley out there. It says, how much would you say adaptability comes into your job? I understand it's a growing industry and that can be a factor. So how often does the job require to make very quick transitions that perhaps contradict your typical methods, workflow, or portfolio?
Constantly, like monthly, daily, every project. You got to understand that as a designer, you have to be very adaptive to different styles and different projects. So on one project, you could be working on a science fiction based look, and then another project, you could do something that's a historical piece. So you have to kind of be adaptable, learn how to design, and make sure that your designs make sense within the context of the project you're working on.
Yeah, I think it depends. I do know that some people have made their career being extreme specialists, where they're like, I just make this one thing, and that totally works for them. I would say it just depends. If you're trying to be a designer for your whole career, it would totally pay off to understand a lot of things. And that doesn't mean just 3D. It's about observing nature, observing design in real life, understanding why things work. It could be as easy as, if we want to dial this down to something that's a little bit more digestible, here's an example. I used to live in a tropical country. I came from Indonesia. So I've never seen snow. I mean, I've seen it on TV. So that means that when I go and design snow for like a landscape, if I've never seen snow, I can probably fake it because I know what it looks like. But if someone comes from like a snow weathered country, they'll probably know way more than me. They'll know how the icicle forms. They'll know like what it looks like in trees. So those are things that you definitely need to understand as a designer, that we're trying to utilize all there is. Wait, I think I'm going on a tangent. Did I go on a tangent, Vincenzo?
No, you're fine.
But yeah, going back on that, basically, yeah, it's just there. You just never know anyways. Like, you don't know what the project's going to ask you for. Like, you might be thinking like, oh, I'm doing the sci-fi project. And then they're going to ask you like, hey, we're gonna do this part of the sci-fi project. And if you're a specialist and they know that they would prefer to have you design spaceships, for example, then they will give that design question to someone else. And if you're the person who wants to only be handed one thing, I think you can definitely aim for that. Or you can be the person that, hey, you're being given this task and you're just a solid designer, so you can have, we know that you can handle different things. Can you do this? And you could say yes. Does that make sense?
No, it makes total sense. Just to kind of go back to what I'm doing here to illustrate what's happening. So basically, I've gotten to a point now at this point where I'm happy with the design. The shape language is all matching up. All the pieces are there. It's modeling enough. And just as a really quick point, I'm only modeling what I need. I'm not going in and modeling details that are not necessary, like little bolts and stuff, because I'm going to paint that over in Photoshop. So that's another kind of thing to go on the 3D stuff. Only utilize what you need. So that you can take the rest into a program that's faster, like Photoshop, to do the rest of the detailing stuff.
That is totally true. It's 100% true.
Yeah.
If you guys can solve something through Post-it notes, we do that all the time. If it takes 2 seconds to just draw it out, well, not 2 seconds, but 10 seconds to just draw like a stick figure, you're like, hey, this one. Then you do that.
Yeah, totally. And real quick, to go on to the next phase. So after this, we've gotten to a point where we're really happy, or at least I'm happy with the architecture. All the pieces are there, all the elements are working. And so the next phase would be taking this to Keyshot, which is the rendering software where we're going to actually play around with materials and lighting so that I can get a good base to paint over in Photoshop. But before I do that, what I did here, if you look here in the subtool palette, I have all the pieces that I want as separated pieces for Keyshot, so that when I apply materials to it, it only applies to this very specific piece and it doesn't apply it to the rest of the model. And I'm going to show you that real quick as I kind of switch the screen over to Keyshot.
And while you guys are waiting, I see a question that I definitely would love to answer. Do you have any key individuals that keep on inspiring you in your respective field? Well, there's a ton of them, but I think we can both agree, Sid Mead. What do you think, Vincenzo? Sid Mead?
Sid Mead, Craig Mullins.
Craig Mullins, Mobius. I am a huge fan of Mobius.
Yeah.
Jeff Darrow is one.
Yeah. Those are like the legends of the concept art community. They definitely are referenced a lot.
Yes, they're the titans that keep us going, because we just look at them and we're like, oh my God, that's amazing. I too want to grow up like that.
Right.
But yeah, not just like current day concept artists or predecessors. There's always like master painters. There's a lot of modern artists that I like. I like James Jean a lot.
Yeah.
I do. What about you, Vincenzo? Anyone else that we haven't named yet?
That has an influence on my work?
Yeah.
I think the person that has the most influence on my work is Steve Messing in the visual effects realm. He's a VFX art director on the Avatar projects. He is the person that I saw his work when I was in school, and I was like, oh my God, I have to do this stuff as a profession. And that's actually a point that I can actually point out there. When you're getting out of school and you're trying to figure out what you want to do or what inspires you, I definitely would try a little bit of everything. Try stylized, try realistic, try different sort of, even like art genres and different type of disciplines like fashion and graphic design, so that you really find out what resonates with you and what doesn't. And then once you find it, then you just kind of aim towards it, and you have a target focus as opposed to kind of mindlessly going around in circles.
Yeah, because I know based on experiences as a student, when I look at a panel, I bet you there's some of you guys who are looking at this and you're either going like, oh my God, I want to do that, or I don't know if I want to do that. And that's a question that's super worth answering. And that's why it's good to go to school. I mean, it basically you'll get exposed to a lot of different teachers. And me and Vincenzo, like, we just work a certain way. There's other people who have like different styles, a lot of things that are like more whimsical. And the more you expose yourself to different artists, the more you're kind of going to figure out like, oh, I actually want to do this instead.
Okay, so I kind of want to explain to you guys what I'm doing here. But basically, I've gotten my program up, Keyshot, which is a rendering software. And what I'm going to do is I have my 3D model here, and I'm going to start applying materials to it and use what we call HDR maps to get the lighting that I want for my scene. So just kind of a little bit of a brief overview of Keyshot. This is probably also, I'm going to say, one of the easiest programs to pick up because it's literally a drag and drop feature, which is what I love. So if you see here, I got a list of materials here, anything from metal all the way to architectural elements, stone, plastic, and paint. I go through a library and I literally just like a drag and drop feature. I don't think I've found anything easier than Keyshot for this. So you can see here, I'm going to apply, we have an interior. So I'm going to just start plopping just some materials just so we get an idea of how the values are working with those materials in the scene. See, we're going to get several of them right here. So now we have kind of our base. I'm going to try some metal there with that one. So we can try different metal materials.
There's a good question here. Is Keyshot compatible with Blender, Vincenzo?
No. So the one that usually goes with Blender is the most popular one is Cycles and Eve. Those are the ones that are built into it, I believe. I'm not super familiar with Blender, but from what I understand, it's built into it. There is, but there is a lot of other rendering software like Octane, Redshift, V-Ray that have plugins for that program though. Just Keyshot's is the only one you can't, unfortunately.
So yeah, there's another question. Is it compatible with Maya? Well, you can port out models from Maya and then light
Yes.
in
Yes.
Keyshot.
Yes.
Vice versa. I'm sorry. I mean, with other programs too.
Yes, absolutely.
But going back to what Vincenzo pointed out earlier, there's a specific reason why we use certain things, and there's a reason why he's using Keyshot right now, which he's about to demonstrate.
So you can see right here, I'm plopping all the materials on. I'm almost done. As you can see, this is again another reason why I'm doing this. Because as you can see, I can on the fly change things based on preference. So for example, like if I wanted to go in here, and I was like, oh, I don't like this color, I can change the metal color by just a drag and drop. And I can quickly iterate and find out what's working and what's not working. Maybe I want orange, you know, I can try a lot of other colors before I commit to something. And this is something that Photoshop can't really offer you that 3D definitely benefits from.
Yeah, the real-time lighting, I think that's the thing. If your production needs something that's very high fidelity and they want to see how the material reacts to real-time lighting, and by real-time lighting, we just mean like, hey, daytime, like nighttime, then yeah, this is one of the ways that you could do it. I mean, I know there's pros out there that can definitely do this by hand, and they're well and fully equipped to do it with 2D. So again, just wanted to just reiterate, we're showing you guys the stuff that's relevant to what we do. Vincenzo and I both work in pretty photoreal quality these days. Well, Vincenzo's always been photoreal, but I used to work with stylized work before I jumped into more photoreal designs. And yeah, I mean, the 3D helps.
Yep. Oh, no, totally. All right, so kind of going back here to what I have here, I have my base materials on here, but I have to fine tune them obviously, right? Because right now, if you look at this still, although this is a base concrete material, it doesn't look very believable, mostly because we're not getting the specularity of light hitting the surface. We're not getting the imperfections you would normally see on something like concrete. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some photo textures to literally project onto the 3D model so you can see the material happening, and then also use a bump map, what we call bump maps, to extrude out details that I don't have to paint later again. So if I were to go, for example, to this piece, right, let's go find.
Oh, also to add on that, I think this is a pretty important point. So one of the things that actually is super crucial to why you're using 3D in some productions if you're doing a set design and like what Vincenzo was saying, like, oh, hey, like for Walking Dead, for example, there's heavily textured objects all throughout. I mean, Walking Dead, seriously, it's like Last of Us. Everything's like in decay. Not everything, but most of them. And then say if my art director suddenly goes like, okay, cool, this is so beautiful. Like you just did this really amazing environment. Now can we see the other side? And then you're like, can you give me 5 days? And they're like, we don't have 5 days. If you do, I joke, most of the time this type of situation will be like taken care of first. But if you do it in 3D and you actually map out the textures, or at least have kind of like a guideline in your set, like, hey, this is what the texture looks like, you can go into the 3D, like what Vincenzo's doing, and then you could just render a different shot and you'll have that exact information. And it's super crucial to tech checks where they're going to ask like, okay, this character is going to walk in this set and it's going to look like this big in this angle. Now, can we figure out if that angle is going to work in case there's going to be a story moment in another section? And if you're just painting in 2D and trying to figure stuff out, like in terms of look, then yeah, I mean, at that point, you're not really figuring out all these things that mostly happen when you're doing art production. But by the time you're trying to basically troubleshoot like the actual production, that's where the 3D is the most valuable, because then you're going to have the 3D information and you can make sure that it works in every single angle. Because really, like, no one really wants to design something and then just find out that, hey, the backside doesn't look good. Hey, why is that? Oh, because we actually forgot to design it. I'm so sorry. Thing that can happen. It's like, oh, that section looks like a car crash, not in a good way. Like, I'm so sorry. That sucks.
And that's going back onto that too. So as you can see here, I'm moving the camera around quite a bit. And what that's offering me is it's allowing me to see my design in multiple different angles, which most of the time when you get a design that's approved in a production, they're always going to want to see multiple angles of the same design. And if you've already blocked it out in a 3D software like what I'm doing, it makes your job so much easier down the line, because you're not sitting there having to start from scratch a whole nother angle. That also, just as a little bit of a bullet point there too, will most likely not match up 1-to-1, whereas this will match up 1-to-1.
Exactly. And someone had a funny point. It's like, so you're saying that you don't want to design like it's a Universal Studios backplot, which is, yes, in that section, when they're trying to figure out what the actual building looks like, you don't want to do that. But in the very beginning, when you're trying to figure out silhouette, then yeah, you actually do in some ways design it like a flat piece, like what Vincenzo was doing. I mean, when you guys think about it, just remember that in the start of this demo, he was starting with a sketch that emphasizes the values and how they correlate well together and what kind of silhouette does it form, and just trying to get a really rough sense of what the design language would be. And even with that, there's so many things that you guys don't see because we're thinking about this in our brains. It's like, hey, this construction, does this work? Can I actually plausibly do this? Does it match with the design sense that's in the production? Can this actually be done and not cause any scale difficulties? Like all that type of stuff is, they're things that don't get talked about as much.
No, totally. As you can see right now, what I'm doing is I'm applying base materials on here, and I'm actually using photo textures to project on detail onto my 3D model. So I can see I used a photo right here of a piece of concrete, and then I'm actually applying a bump map, as you can see right here. So now that extrudes out some detail. And this, again, it'll give you some more accurate lighting representation so that when you go back and paint over this, you have a base to start with that's really strong, and then you can kind of iterate on top of that. And you're spending, again, less time trying to figure out the lighting, and you're spending more time designing.
Oh, and here's another interesting question. Is there any place for traditional art in the world of concept art? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, most of the really amazing concept artists, like they start with drawing. That's still a valuable tool. We all rely on drawing a lot. Like all your traditional skills will absolutely be valuable. The only thing is like we're talking about, I think the industry is moving so fast that there's not a lot of room to, for example, spend like a month for a painting. We would not have a job.
Oh, that would be a dream to have a month on painting.
some productions still do. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but for most of us, it's like, okay, do this. And especially like when I was doing a lot of blue sky development for some projects, they're basically like, hey, we want this concept. You have like 6 hours. Sometimes I have an hour, and that's insane. And you really don't want to do that too often. But they're like, we want a finished piece. Can you do something really quick? And yeah, I mean, that's when you start using all these tools for your disposal. But there are productions out there that still rely heavily on 2D, but 2D as in digital painting. In terms of traditional, yeah, there's still a place to it. It's just not as common. But I wouldn't discourage anyone from going to 2D or traditional if that's really what you guys like. It just means that your career might be different than what you see out there right now.
Okay, so I got my base materials in there. The one thing I'm going to do is play with the ground plane. And this is I want to show you guys how you can use a photo to get some detail here as well. So I'm going to create some water effect here. We have under liquids, you'll see a liquid material here. So now we see you can get this translucent type of material like water. But as you can know, if you ever go and study water in real life, there's no way that you're going to get this sort of calm water effect unless there's zero wind or anything happening. And clearly with my photo back here, that is showcasing that there's heavy wind from all the cloud deformation happening back there. So we're going to need to put some ripple effects in there to make it look more believable. To paint that traditionally would take forever, and it would also be a nightmare. So to actually kind of shortcut that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my material, and I'm going to go to my textures tab, and I'm going to add a bump. And if I go to my tools, I have a water texture here. And so now, as you can see, when I just plop it on, now I get a water effect with all the ripples. And then from that, I can also adjust how much I want by adjusting the bump height, just to see how much water effects I want. So the lower I go down, as you see the water ripples start to come less and less. I can also adjust the actual scale of it. So as you can see, we have a really large structure. And so we're going to have the ripples be really small to help sell this scale of a big structure. If I were to have the ripples the opposite end and they're really big like this, right? Then our scale's thrown off. Now this thing looks smaller. That's also something to think about too. When you apply textures to your model, you got to think about the scale. How big would that texture be applying to whatever model or piece you're designing? So I would say something like that looks pretty good right there. Right?
Yeah.
Now this is time.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say what you just said. Basically, that was a nail. That was definitely like the point where why do we learn fundamentals? Because what Vincenzo was saying, he automatically knew that the size of the texture matters to convey the scale. And that's not something you're going to get from the 3D because you're just going to plop it and then, hey, this software did something for me. But in reality, it's like, you know, if you don't have that knowledge, again, the tool's not going to convey some of that, most of it actually. But it will help you with this, which is extremely fast iterations.
Right, totally. So now I've gotten a lot of the grunt work done here, a lot of the applying materials and making sure that they look appropriate. Now it's kind of the fun part, which is basically finding out the composition I want. And this is really, I'm going to show you guys the huge benefit of doing this. So with an HDR map I have plugged into here, I can literally on the fly change my lighting setup in any way that I see fit. I can start turning different pieces, as you can see right here. So now if I start moving the model around, so obviously the horizon line's not really matching up, so we got to move that more appropriately down here. There we go. Now you can see you can get real world on the fly results. It's not costing you a whole lot of time, and you can iterate and really find out the shot that really works for you. And then the cool thing about Keyshot and a lot of other rendering software is you can change the focal length almost like a real life camera. So I can go more wide angle if I wanted to. I can zoom in, crouch up, look. So if I wanted to sell that epic shot that we were talking about, I can go down somewhere like this, closer to the water, change the focal length. I can go even more extreme, go 20 focal length, and now we start getting a completely different result. And this will also sell the space differently than a shot that's at a 200 millimeter lens and that you're looking up higher up. Let's also try, so let's screenshot that. So what you do is usually once you let it render, you can take a screenshot and it'll take almost like a 2D picture of what is here. So you can take this over into Photoshop and do compositing work afterwards.
Interesting question. Could you do fisheye lens in these programs?
Yes. So to get a fisheye sort of effect, generally fisheye focal lengths are around the 8 to 15 millimeter focal length. I would say even less. So all you have to do is just type in 8 here under the focal length. As you can see, you're going to get something really extreme. It's not going to have the true vignetting of a traditional fisheye lens. So that is something to also take into consideration. You're going to have to warp this in Photoshop. But you can go pretty extreme. You can go even more telephoto and go almost like a 300 millimeter lens. So now you're almost being a quasi DP as opposed to just a concept artist. A DP meaning a director of photography. But I'm going to go more of a 40 because that's, no, not 400, 40.
There's also an interesting question about the price of Keyshot.
Yep.
And I mean, at the end of the day, I think, again, we're investing in ourselves, and that's a big deal. For the type of work that we do, I mean, for myself, like I have my license and all that. The same as, you know, having a Photoshop license. It does come into factor, though. I have heard other pros talk about this. You got to figure out if it's worth it for you guys. But like what Vincenzo was showing, like this is where the value is at. And if you find that that value is worth it for your career and worth it for the type of stuff that you guys want to do, then I mean, at the end of the day, like it's an investment. Like you will get a return out of it. Is it the right investment? That's something that you'd have the responsibility to try to see.
Totally.
And Rolf, hey, shout out to Rolf. He's one of my coworkers. He's pointing out that Blender's Easy Render comes in completely free.
Yep, absolutely. All right.
Yeah,
So
it's also a valuable tool too. Or Maya Arnold, I use that.
So I got one shot there that I like, but you know, supposedly I want to sell this shot with a different sort of mood. So I'll change the HDR map and that'll help sell the mood, right? So we have, like, suppose I want to do something a little bit more. Let's see what this one offers. What's up? Takes a little bit to open up. So as you can see, now we got a different lighting scheme altogether. I'm going to go with a little bit more of a tighter telephoto focal length, cropped in type shot. So you can get something more like this, something on the horizon. We'll go to the height, change it so you don't see that black bar there. Right. That's another shot you could potentially use. As you can see, within the short time that we've done this, it's already given us the flexibility to change different moods and to self-design a lot of different ways than traditional tools will not allow us to do, basically.
Yeah, and also another thing is once you get really like into the cinematic side of things and lighting, which is what, you know, Keyframe has a lot to do with that. Like, what does it look like? What is the shot going to look like when you're trying to do a movie scene? That's when you get really deep into like, hey, if you do an overcast versus like a backlit, like what Vincenzo's doing, it's amazing how fast you could get these effects. And if you're actually someone who's a fan of lighting, like I am actually a huge fan, then it's crazy. You're just like, okay, I'm going to render this. And I have this idea in my head that it's going to be like foggy or like overcast or direct lighting. I mean, directly lit. then, you know, the thing is like the software helps you get there. And if you have that vision in your head, it'll be a lot stronger because you already know roughly like, hey, I like these type of shots, and that's the type of design that I want to convey.
Exactly. So I'm just trying a couple different shots, trying a couple different HDR maps to help sell different moods. You know, this kind of has a more monolithic sort of feeling with the light coming behind it and blooming on the edges, bleeding through. And that's another kind of cool thing with this program also is you can change the material specularity with a lot of these sort of tools here. You can adjust gamma, which is basically the exposure level. And then we have a thing called bloom, which would actually increase the intensity of the light and how it bleeds over on certain materials. So the more you increase intensity, I don't think this particular HDR map showing it best, but you can see it right there. And you can see you're starting to get this sort of real world caustics effect that you would get if you were to actually go outside and shoot a photo of this in broad daylight. I can take a shot like that.
For your specs, they're asking like, what kind of tablet are you using?
I'm using a Cintiq 24 HD. Then I'm also doing this on a laptop that has 32 gigs of RAM. And it's actually an older laptop. It's about 5 or 6 years old.
And also, what brush are you using?
I'm not using any brushes currently, but the brush I would be using the most is the eraser brush, oddly enough. Probably didn't expect that one.
You just had to throw that in there. Actually, that's a good tip for you guys. If you have a texture brush, if you put that as an erase, that actually can come in handy because then you have dual wield between the brush itself and the eraser. I do that a lot.
Yeah.
So we just have to ask the brush question because,
of course,
what is the brush that you're using? Probably the same as all what you guys are using. And I know people are like, that's not the real question. There has to be a magic brush. The magic brush is the friendships that you develop along the way.
See.
Please, no one kill me over there.
And then the great thing too is once you start building out certain pieces, you can actually duplicate the model multiple times. So for example, suppose I like this shot, but I want to show that there's architecture in the back. I can actually just duplicate different elements that I've already created and just start rotating and moving around. And I'm going to show you that real quick once I get the horizon working just right. There we go. Okay, so suppose I want more architecture going on back there. I can take the whole piece, I can duplicate it, and then I can actually move it, right? I can save a shot, so I can call this final shot. So that basically when I go back and I want to find that shot again, I can reference it. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to move this piece. So suppose there's another piece of that out there in the ocean somewhere. I'm going to also scale it down to help fake depth because it's clearly not that far away, but I want to sell it like it's even farther away than it actually is. So I'll go like this and I'll scale the whole thing down. Ooh, that's too much.
Ooh.
That
actually looks really cool on the distance.
Yeah, so we're going to turn off the water effects. So we don't have double water effects going on in there. I'm going to take that. We're going to move that piece. Oops. Right there. Move it off to the side, for example. And the great thing, we're going to go back. So now we're in my shot again. And see, the great thing about this whole thing is that if I put it in here and I'm like, I actually don't like it, or it's not really working, I can just remove different pieces by simply turning off the eyeball. So if I don't want that piece, I can remove that piece. I can remove other pieces back there, which you're probably not seeing right now. You see, like if I didn't want that piece, I can just turn it on, but then I can turn it back on if I decide to change my mind. So now right there, as you kind of see, I took a couple screenshots of different lighting. I've already got 3 or 4 different sort of moods and different ways of selling the same design. And also, if I were to show this in a presentation, I can say, here's some different options we can say in terms of storytelling, how we're going to display this piece. but also I can showcase from different sort of vantage points too. Be like, okay, do we want, from the storytelling standpoint, do we want to approach this piece or approach this architecture in the story from the front, or do we want to approach it from the back? And if we want to approach it from the back, I can just turn around and be like, this is what it's going to look like when we approach it from the back. I'm going to take a screenshot of that. And then I want to show you guys just one more trick in here, because I also find this particularly useful. Oops, I moved this piece right here. Nope. There we go. You gotta wait for it to render a little bit before you take a screenshot, because it's gonna get all grainy and noisy. We'll get that one right. Awesome. Now I'm going to show you guys real quick. You can actually customize the backplate image. The backplate meaning this sky dome you have back here of whatever you want, so that you can just kind of match it to a photo you have or a painting that you already created, and it'll actually follow that aspect ratio as well. And I'm going to stop sharing this particular screen, and we're going to go over to Photoshop to show you that. Okay, so we're back in Photoshop. So suppose this is my sketch. I want to use this aspect ratio. Oops. I think we're freezing up a little bit here. Second. All right, cool. Those. Tools. I'm gonna. What do I? There. So suppose I want to use this as my backplate, something a little bit more moody. So I'm just taking this in to Photoshop, adjust it the way I want it. Then I can also take some other photos in there that I want. I want this a darker color. I'm going to erase all this part out because I don't want any of this sort of dirt stuff. I just want the clouds back there. And this is where you can use some of your traditional painting skills. You can paint on top of these elements now. Cloud brush. Oops.
Someone's just mentioned that they want to take your class someday.
Huh?
Yunhao is saying that he hopes that he can take a class with you.
Yeah, so I am actually teaching just this type of stuff in my environment design class in this fall. I also will be teaching a vehicles and armors class as well, which I'll again go over a lot of this sort of similar stuff in presenting stuff like that in your pipeline. Oops.
Yeah, I normally teach a class too, environment design, but kind of taking a break since work's kind of high bandwidth right now. But hey, yeah, take Vincenzo's class. Seriously, I want to take his class. Are you gonna let me take your class?
Absolutely. Welcome anytime to my class if you like.
Sounds good.
All right, so just combining a couple photos in there just because I want to help sell a very specific mood in there. Sorry, Photoshop is freezing a little bit right now. Oops. That's one thing also to kind of remember too when you're doing stuff like this. If you have too many things open, it's really taxing on the computer, especially Photoshop and 3D software. So be cautious of that. You know, make sure not to try to overheat your machine. That definitely can be something not good.
Oh, and there's a question that's being highlighted right now that's pretty important actually. So someone's asking like, what is a keyframe? Is this a storyboard element? Is this a previs element? Is this for some tandem VFX work? I'm lost with how the word is being used versus its actual meaning and purpose.
So you're kind of asking what a keyframe is. So the term keyframe comes from, it's actually an animation term. It's basically just one still of a animation for those keyframes. But in the case of this, it's just basically a snapshot or a mood piece of a particular part in either a game or a film. Usually keyframes are more illustrative than a traditional sort of design that's on a gray background like you would see as a prop design or a character design. Keyframes kind of show a little bit of everything. It shows mood, it shows lighting, it shows design, and it shows storytelling all in one piece. Does that answer the question, Letta?
I hope so. I think you said yes. That's excellent. But yeah, I mean, the keyframe is something that is used to tell the production like, hey, for this part, we're going to use basically all these elements. Like for example, like before people are before you're even going to do the shot, someone's going to design it out, most likely, if they have the budget for it. And that's why keyframe is super important. Before they go in and design all the props, all the set design, before they decide what the budget's going to be, the keyframe is actually super valuable because that's part of our job too. We're trying to help the production determine how much money are they spending, and keyframe goes a lot into that. They'll look at our work and figure out like, hey, can this be done? If it's going to be done, what's the so like Bible for the production to look at? Like, hey, it's going to look like this. It's going to be daytime. It's going to be that information is going to be in the keyframe as well.
So I kind of want to go back to showing this. So as you can see right here, I took my 2D painting that I had in Photoshop where I composited some elements in there. It created a backplate in here that now it fits the aspect ratio of the painting, and I can actually freely move my 3D model to kind of match perspective what we have with the backplate. And as you can see, the lighting's not matching up because it's using the HDR image or information from the more sunset HDR we have. So we're going to change that so that it matches this lighting scheme a little bit better. But first, I'm going to put all the elements in place. I'm going to save a camera real quick again. We're going to call this second shot.
And another question is does a person who do keyframe, can the person who does keyframe freelance as a matte painter? And I think as long as you have the skill sets, I don't know, I think Vincenzo would agree with this. If you
Absolutely.
have, yeah, it depends on, again, what you can do.
I would actually say in a lot of cases, a lot of times, at least in the game and film realm, most of your work on the freelance basis is doing keyframes. Because usually you're hired as a consultant to do very specific type of inspirational art to help inform others in the production on what they can build and what they potentially can make. And then usually artists in-house at a studio will go and replicate a lot of that type of stuff or use it as their inspiration to jump off of them to create more designs.
Yeah, it just depends on the nature of the production. I mean, there's always exceptions, but sometimes if your job is to work really closely with the production and they're relying on your designs to dictate what happens on set or what happens in my case, like with Telltale, I literally was working like one desk away from the 3D guys. So then if they have a question, they're going to go to me and be like, hey, what about this part? And then we discuss it. The art director is literally just next door. So if you're, again, this is again not applicable to what's happening right now. Just as a caveat, I know that there's circumstances going on where things are changing, but yeah, I mean, the studio's just going to see what they need. If they need you to be on site and it's better, then yeah, you will be on site.
So right now I'm just waiting for the HDR to load. It's freezing up a little bit, but I'm getting basically just to kind of, for you guys to see this stuff, I'm putting the elements where I want them compositionally so that right now, once I put the HDR in, then I can match the lighting and I don't have to worry too much about placement of the objects. I might have to actually close a couple programs because it's computer's kind of getting taxed a little bit with this stuff. So give me 1 second. I'm going to close a couple pieces here.
So here's a good question while you're closing it out. So Lily here asked earlier and is asking again, but how was the transition from, well, someone asked this earlier, how was the transition from, you know, graduating and finishing school to getting into the workforce for you guys?
You want to answer that question first, Aletta?
Yes. I guess I have to question, like, when you guys are talking about transitioning from high school to college, are you asking specifically about how we decided to go to art college? Does that sound right? To Lily, can you type that out? Yes, that too, lol. Cool. Well, so a little bit about me. I've always been like a game fan. I've played so many games when I was younger, which is kind of hilarious that once I got into the game industry, I did not have too much time to actually play games. But I mean, I'm sure that's the same with a lot of you guys. You like entertainment, you like games, and then suddenly you're like, hey, can I make this for a living? And that's what happened to me. I was just like, I don't know what else I was gonna do. I think I was willing to try other careers too, but then I was like, I like art. Can I actually do this? And somehow, like, I stumbled into graphic design because that seems like a logical choice. And if you're asking like what happened between high school and college, I'm like, that's like a jumble of like cloud of I have no idea what happened. I went to graphic design and there was a very good teacher in San Jose State, which where I was from. This graphic design teacher was saying like, hey, so you want to be a graphic designer? What do you like about graphic design? And I was like, I love drawing and I like movies and film and games. And they're like, you know, actually graphic designers don't draw that much. And I was just like, oh my God, what? Oh my God. And like years of pain. And you know what, they actually did a really good job like mentoring you with, hey, if you don't like this, then maybe try something else. And then I found out that, oh, there's an animation illustration department. Just like the AAU biz dev and game development, where it's like, hey, that's the stuff that we do. And like, you know, game dev and visual development in AAU is actually great that that's still around, like that traditional focus, because I just saw other people's drawings and I was like, I kind of like it. I really, that's what I want to do. And somehow it's just having enough guts to just say like, I think I could do this, and somehow you just keep going. I don't know if that answered anyone's question, but it's true. I just kept going.
Yeah.
Call it rolling down the hill and down. And then somehow it's like the Princess Bride. It's like as you wish, as my wish, and then you end up at the bottom. And you're like, I'm not dead yet. It's great, awesome.
Yeah, I would say my experience was kind of similar. I first started off doing graphic design work. I was a little bit on a fence about it. I didn't know for sure if I wanted to go the illustration route or if I want to go the graphic design route. I always felt that graphic design was a safe creative field to go into, and that's originally why I went into it. But then I quickly found out doing the job that I wasn't quite as satisfied with doing graphic design work as I was doing illustrative concept design work. So then I made the switch while I was in school to do that stuff. And then actually, I always tell my students this one, but when I actually finished the academy, I ditched my entire portfolio that I made in school. And I will tell you, usually when you go to school is a great place to learn their fundamentals and all your tools. But when you leave school, you also are going to continue learning and getting better. And that's when actually the learning really starts, is taking the stuff you learned in school and applying it and revamping your portfolio. So what I did is when I got done with school, I looked at the type of jobs I wanted to get. I looked at the type of artists that worked in those places and in those fields. And I did a compare and contrast between what I had and what they had. And I asked myself the honest question of, does the work I have, can that facilitate anything for these companies? And is my work at a comparable level to what's already out there? And the answer is no, which it was. I had to work harder. So I spent some extra time learning some extra skills, whether that's through additional schooling, Gumroads, other sort of tutorial stuff to supplement what I learned at the academy. That's kind of helped me get the job that I got and in the field that I wanted to get into. But then also having a clear vision of what you want is a really big thing. I think it's always better to have fewer pieces in your portfolio that are more focused and that you know exactly, if an employer were to look at it right away, could tell instantly what kind of work you do, than the portfolio that has a bunch of stuff that has no focus. So I always tell my students too that when you're building a portfolio, you always want to try to focus on 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 skill sets that you think you can apply to your portfolio and really get strong at doing those things, as opposed to having a portfolio with a lot of stuff. It's just a lot more manageable to do it that way too.
Yeah, I had a similar arc with Vincenzo where mine actually happened mid-career. I did not really do stuff in photorealistic styles until maybe 2017, 2016. And it took a lot of work. Again, what he was saying, it takes a lot of work to pivot your stuff to what you want. And you know what, not to say that there's always people who are gonna come out of school like guns blazing, the best people, and that's completely expected too. But you're not the same, you know, our experiences are not the same. For me, I had to actually spend some time making stuff that I want, because the thing is, and I'm going to do the food analogy right now, Kenzo, haha, that the school will teach you the fundamentals. And if you take really good classes with people that you trust, and like they give you like pretty much like the golden answers of like fundamentals, like composition, all that stuff, it's like you're learning to cook and they'll tell you like, hey, some stuff you can't make it unless your oven is at a certain degree. And that remains to be true everywhere. Like, for example, focal point is a thing that's never going to be not a thing. Or like flow, design language, believability, scale, uniformity, all the stuff that I'm telling you guys. I didn't really get it just in school, but they're the people who I owe a lot to my teachers to introduce me to all those things that I wouldn't know otherwise. And if you don't know how to look for it, then that's where it becomes really valuable, that they'll give you that first step of like, hey, I don't even know what I'm looking at. They're like, okay, look over here. And you're like, okay, cool, I'm looking over there. And then maybe somewhere along the line, you're like, okay, I'm looking over there, and that's great. But what else is there? And then you're gonna have to, you're responsible to develop yourself, just like, again, like Vincenzo and myself. Like, I did do a lot of work outside of work to make a portfolio that I'm happy with. But it pays off. It really does.
So last little bit here, just to kind of wrap up this part of the demo, I am applying, so I applied the backplate image that I created in Photoshop so that I can plot my model and match the perspective here. As you can see, atmosphere and all those other elements are not quite working there, but that's okay, because in Photoshop, I would go back in there and paint those elements out. And that's where the traditional digital painting stuff will apply at this point. And what I'm doing is, since my HDR map, if you look at the light's coming from behind here. It's like actually coming up from inside the clouds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a light source and kind of replicate it, what I have here, so that it further matches to my backplate. So if I were to open this up here, where's that light? By the way, once you start getting really into this, it can get really complicated finding all your pieces. So that's also something to take into consideration. Just try to keep things organized. We call this final shot.
Oh God, yes. Final underscore final shot underscore already revised underscore. I didn't know what I was doing.
Okay, so I'm going to move this stuff. So we're going to say it's a little bit back here, going up here. Come all the way back here. Camera. Here.
Oh, I wanted to remind Vincenzo, you were talking about how important your canvas size is. Do you remember that?
Oh yes, the canvas size. Yeah, so I like to paint at usually no less than 4,000 pixels. And the reason behind that is because if you paint at a too low of a resolution, what ends up happening is if they want to use that for something else, either a marketing asset or they want to put it in an art book, then if you have it at a really low resolution, you have to change it. Or if they want to zoom in on your painting and say, I want you to design this section and crop this whole part out, then now you're kind of at a point where you have to start over. So if you have more pixels to start with, though, that'll become less of a problem for you to change on the fly.
Hey, team.
Yeah.
There's some chat in there asking about how to get your foot in the door, you know, like maybe literally, like how did you go about interviewing or making those connections? And there's a bunch of questions about 1099s and W-2s, and I really don't know how to answer tax advice for people looking for contract work. You know, I don't know how to even address that, but I do know that there's quite a bit of people asking, like I feel like I'm at a wall, or someone put there, it's like a secret that, you know, I cannot figure out of how to actually get my foot in the door. And, you know, maybe there's something you can speak to about how did you get your foot in the door in the industry?
Sure. I think I could start with that one. I actually have a lot to say about that. So the first thing I will say, when you're ever applying for a job or you're ever looking to work at a particular studio, you have to understand that they're looking for you. When you see an open rec, they're looking for you to fill a particular need and to solve a particular problem for them. So if you got to look at, you know, for example, Pixar is hiring, you got to understand the kind of work Pixar does and what type of skill sets they would need in their production. And it's different per studio. Every studio is different. It's going to be different within the live action realm. It's going to be different within the game development realm. And it's going to be different per position too. A senior position is going to require more experience and more knowledge on using very specific type of tools and workflows than a junior position. So I think that's one thing of a little bit of a tip there is apply in a position that you know that you're ready for. If you're starting out, generally you're not going to be applying for senior positions just because you don't have the experience. But when you apply to these sort of studios, you really got to understand what they're looking for. So going back to the Pixar analogy, looking at the type of artists that work there, the type of work that they create, and then looking at your own portfolio and seeing how that could facilitate stuff for them. Like, for example, if I were to apply for Pixar and show them my work, they probably wouldn't be very interested in it. And quite frankly, not because I can't paint, but because the type of work I do doesn't facilitate the type of work they're looking for their projects. They need someone to design in a very stylized fashion. So you have to look at that and analyze that. And then one other point I'd like to say with that as well is you got to also look at who your peers are there as well. So when they're hiring someone, they're usually trying to hire someone who has a skill set that the other teammates don't have that you can kind of facilitate with. So in the case of Alena's work, for example, they hired her based on not only does she have good work, but she also had 3D skills. That was a really big thing, right, Elena? You're applying to
that would be a big part of the interview process for sure.
Yeah, no, totally. And you know, you got to also think too, the artists that are there already, they can offer something to the table that the studio already has, and they want something that you can bring that they don't have. So if you just do replica art or knockoff art of an artist that already works there, they really don't have a reason to hire you. And the reason is because they have it already. So you got to think about it from that standpoint. What can you offer them? So that would be my advice there. Aletta, you want to kind of add to that?
Yeah, actually, there's one point that I think a lot of people already talked about, but in conjunction to what Vincenzo is saying, is that you can't really fake genuineness. Like Vincenzo got to where he is because he's genuinely, like, I believe, very enthusiastic about movie work. Like I super love games and movies, and I'm super stoked about the stuff that I'm doing for Jurassic because it has the same elements. We can't fake that. I mean, there's going to be a point where there's going to be a tons of different pros telling you like, hey, do this, do this, do this. But if you're trying to listen to everyone, you might not get anywhere, or you might get there. I'm saying in a general point, we like what we do, and we do the portfolio because we want to get the jobs that we like with the types of designs that we want to do. Like if you look at Vincenzo's work, it's very clear like, oh, this is the type of stuff he likes. And so the production is going to value that because there's going to be some productions that are going to be okay with you guys just, you know, being capable. And there's other projects where they need someone with that specific knowledge. And sometimes that specific knowledge you can only get if you're super passionate about things and you're like, oh, I really love how doors work. I love doors, anything, Art Nouveau. Everyone in my team is laughing right now if they're here, but seriously, like Art Nouveau doors, I love Art Deco doors, I love language, I love a lot of different things that may be specific to you, and that is extremely valuable Because someone else is going to be in that team and they're going to be like, oh yes, if we want to talk about confectionery ovens, Vincenzo's your person. And then it's going to be like, you know what? He knows his confectionery ovens. He's going to know every single material that's been used by like the Victorian women of the 19. Someone's going to kill me for that too, for being factually incorrect. But that's the point, is that if you guys are ever stuck in a roadblock, like what Hector was mentioning, don't forget that you got here because of a reason. I mean, I don't really know too many people who are like, oh yeah, just because. Like, that's fine. I don't think that's a bad thing. But then if you're stuck, then kind of remember, like, okay, if just because doesn't work, then why did I want this? And if you don't know what you want, then that's a question that's worth figuring out. Again, like, that's the stuff that we're both saying right now.
And kind of piggybacking off of what Elena said, you can either go two ways with this industry. You can either go specialized or you can go generalist. I would say most of us are generalists by nature. I would say a good 80% of the workforce makes up generalists. And generalists are people who they're not necessarily a master at one thing, but they're kind of good at a lot of different things. And those are the type of people that generally work in studios. And that's kind of the skill sets that they're looking for, is someone who's malleable and adaptable and who can do multiple different things, because that's something they really value. Someone that is able to change their style, change their approach to things, and is always looking to adapt to whatever production they have. Now you can also go the specialized route, which is somebody who does one thing and does one thing only, but does it the best. And there are people out there in this industry, especially in the film and game development, where they are only hired for doing very specialized work. Like, you can be the robot designer and you'll only get work doing robot design. Now, the kind of the catch to that, though, is that if you're that type of
Hey, Vincenzo, your audio
person
cut out.
who's very specialized. Oh, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I think it cut out for a little bit.
Oh, did I just drop out all of what I just said?
Not all of it. Someone's saying, like, he just told us the secret to the universe and no one heard it.
Okay, let me kind of back it up a little bit. So going back to the specialized stuff, when you're hired as a specialist or a creative consultant, you're hired because you have a very specific skill for that particular production. And it's usually for a very finite amount of time, which is what you usually see in a freelance sort of lifestyle. You'll see someone who's hired to just do, like I was saying before, robot designs. And they'll often approach different designers and they'll say, hey, we have X amount of robots we need designed. Could you facilitate some conceptual designs for this project? And you'll be hired just to do those X amount of designs and then usually laid off and worked on to the next project. So that's also something to think about, the kind of approach you want to go into. There's no right or wrong way to do this. It just really comes down to a matter of preference and taste.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Okay. No, go ahead.
I was gonna add too, like, I know that as a student, I remember how I was a student. So I know the big point that people might stumble on is when we're talking about generalism, don't forget that Vincenzo is already pointing out that his portfolio might not be the best for some Pixar projects. Like, if they want to do, here's an example, Trolls in DreamWorks. Those people who got hired, they got to translate their designs to screen. Like, I know the visual artist in that movie was like amazing, but then if they apply to, for example, Sledgehammer, I'm not too sure that they're gonna get that job. But they're technically generalists because within that style or that realm of feature film, stylized feature films, they could jump into anything else. Like, I know that those people are extremely talented. They could probably tackle like sci-fi, horror, Secret Life of Pets, however have you. And that's the type of generalist that we're talking about. It's not, I can do anything and everything, although there are people who are like that. But when we're talking about specialized, we're like what Vincenzo was saying, it's specifically like, I do one thing, and it's basically like the right shoe of this one person in this one character in this one world. Not exactly like that, but you guys get the point.
No, totally. That's exactly it. You got to just kind of figure out at what point and what type of work you feel like yours matches up the most with whatever studio you're applying for. Your work, just like any of us, not all of our work is going to fit with every style and every project. You just got to kind of find which ones work with you and which ones don't. And it's okay. That's perfectly fine. And most people, when they hire somebody, they want to know instantly the type of, they want to kind of typecast you in the type of designer almost instantly. They want to be like, okay, you do, for example, stylized environments, or you do stylized characters, or you do realistic environments. It's something that if they can't really figure that out right away, then you oftentimes can confuse them. And sometimes it might even hurt you even getting hired. They don't even know what you want to do, or even why you would even apply to them if it's not even within the correct style of the studio.
Yeah, I think a lot of that.
Give you guys like a 10-minute warning as we're getting close to
Okay.
9.
Oh yeah. Should we answer the 1099? I feel like that answer is basically get a tax person.
Yeah, I can kind of give it a basic sort of overview of the 1099. So if you're working as a, just real quick, when you're working as a designer, you're either going to be a W-2 employee or you're going to be a 1099 employee. And there's two pretty big differences. And this is the thing that I think a lot of people don't think about when they're applying for jobs. When you're a W-2 employee, generally speaking, taxes are taken out from you from the company. So they usually do all the tax work for you. As a 1099 employee, you generally are doing the taxes for yourself. So you have to actually submit your taxes quarterly yourself. So that usually means they're going to take out more tax too when you're on a 1099 employee. And one thing you got to think about is when you are applying for a job, you should ask, hey, am I a 1099 or am I a W-2 employee? And if they tell you, oh, I'm a 1099 employee, or you're going to be a 1099 employee, you need to add a certain percentage above what a normal W-2 employee will get paid, so that you get paid the correct amount after taxes are done. Because a $50,000, for example, someone who makes 50K at a studio that's a W-2 employee is going to have a certain amount of money taken out, as versus someone who's a 1099 employee at 50K is going to have a lot more taxes taken out. So you may need to actually add 20 or 30% to that, actually be like, well, I need to get paid actually 70K to really be making 50K work. And that's a whole other topic with other type of people who are more experienced than me to talk about tax type stuff.
And to backtrack on that too, it's super important question. And I know that this is actually extremely important for every single person here. Talking about health insurance for artists, it really depends on what your job is. If you're a freelancer, then you absolutely will have to provide your own health insurance, however you can. I think it's a super important and very topical issue. It's just make sure that you're properly compensated for your time and your efforts and your talents. Just remember that, you know, you guys all deserve your health. Your health is like pretty crucial, you guys. I mean, I can't tell you enough. Like, I've had back pain, tendonitis, what have you. Thankfully, not like debilitating, but just make sure that you take care of yourself. And yes, some companies will have extremely good health insurance. Some of them might not be very good. So it's up to you guys to understand how to negotiate that. Hope that
No,
helps.
totally. So real quick, since we only have a couple more minutes, I'm just going to kind of tell you briefly what I'm doing here. I took a screenshot of the 3D asset, all posed out in the composition that I want. I screenshot it, and what I'm doing now is painting over it so that it matches further into the plate that I've established. And this is where you start applying the textures and paint on top of it to kind of finish out the painting. So I'm starting to add atmosphere in here. Let's see if we were to kind of add all those together, you can kind of see how I'm pushing it back now with some atmosphere, right? I'm going to actually take in parts of the photo right here, and I'm going to overlap it and then feather it out. So now it actually looks a little bit more like it's blending in appropriately to the environment. Goes with this.
Interesting question. Are there any games that have recently come out that made your jaw drop in terms of environments? Ghost of Tsushima, man.
Is there any jobs that, say that one more time?
Are there any games that have recently come out that made your jaw drop in terms of environments? And I said Ghost of Tsushima.
Oh, that one and The Last of Us, for sure.
Oh yeah. Well, I didn't figure you were gonna answer that, so I wanted to leave it out to you.
I mean, I played The Last of Us, and when I was watching, what? I was sitting there just like looking at all the beautiful art that's being displayed.
Oh, and super important. Not so sorry, but someone keeps questioning. We have to answer this one. What is the pixel ratio that you're using? Sorry, I know Dan's been asking that. I believe I've kind of dropped the ball on that. Sorry, Dan.
The pixel ratio?
Yes. What is your dimensions?
Well, right now, so because of demonstration purposes and time, this is actually pretty small right now. It's only about like 1200 pixels. I will tell you, if you're working in a production, I would work bigger than this. But for demonstration purposes and time, I'm just taking a screenshot just so I can kind of show you the paint over process. But I would do minimum 4000 pixels.
Yeah, I would say that's a production standard because we do the same with Jurassic.
So I'm adding some vignetting to help it feel a little bit more filmic. Just duplicating the models.
And someone saying soon to be 8K. I'm like, that depends.
8K?
That depends. You're saying like, are we gonna work at 8K? We're like, well, I mean, sometimes, but
I guess, yeah, no, continue saying what you're gonna say.
It can be problematic because of the size.
So it just really depends. You got to remember when you're designing stuff, you got to remember what it's being used for. If it's being used for conceptual design, 8K is a little bit excessive for that because it doesn't really need to be that big to showcase a design. Now, if you're doing marketing art that's going to be blown up on a huge poster, then 8K might be the minimum. It just really depends on your outcome.
Yes, I can attest to that because I did a banner for a company client that showcased at PAX in Seattle, and it was like a 5 feet times, 6 times 4 feet. That was like the biggest ratio that I've ever worked in. So I had to cut it into 4 pieces and then combine it at the end. So yeah, it just depends. I know a friend of mine who did a giant banner for Comic-Con for Electronic Arts, and he had to work at 600 DPI. That thing was pretty much like monolithic.
I mean, that's huge.
It's huge. It's Andy's work.
Oh, nice. So I'm adding some clouds in here just so that they kind of blend in a little bit more. It's also directing my eye to this part of the composition.
Sorry to interrupt you, Vincenzo, but your iPhone camera turned off.
Oh, no.
Locked up. It's minor. We're wrapping this up. Yeah, there we go.
Oh, there. Can you see it? Okay. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, I'm going to show you guys one last thing, and then we're going to just call this done because we're running out of time here. All right. Okay, so I'm just going to call this done for right now. And then what I would usually do when I'm done with this, suppose this is the final painting. It's obviously still in a work in progress state. What I would do here is I'd actually add a film filter and do chromatic aberrations to help make it resemble more of a camera lens and almost kind of like a final shot of a film. So I have some actions built in here that I've developed to kind of do this stuff. And all I have to do is press play and it'll start doing all these effects here.
Should we also answer some of the questions that might be cool to answer, Vincenzo?
Yeah.
Because the one thing that I do want to answer, like, what is the difference between illustration and concept? That was
What's the difference?
What's the difference between illustration and concept? And I think that's a big deal because honestly, like I had trouble understanding that difference when I was a student too.
The biggest difference is design. That's the biggest difference in the most basic terms. Again, conceptual designers, we're not real, although we do illustrative pieces like you see here, they're really to facilitate a design and we're there to solve problems. Whereas illustrators are more there to evoke an emotion or a feeling in a piece. We're there to solve problems consistently. And I will say that a lot of my job is not really doing stuff like this. It's actually just painting over different 3D models that game designers give us to help facilitate a better design and contextualize the space. So sometimes it's just dirty sketches, like almost like Post-it note type sketches. So that's the big difference. Whereas an illustrator, you're just there to solve a very, facilitate a very specific need, like a book cover illustration or marketing art type illustration. The concept art kind of has the whole gamut of everything.
Yeah, and our
product,
product.
that, Letta?
Oh, sorry, interrupt you, but yeah, our product isn't the final product. That's the biggest thing for me.
Yes.
That actually helps solve that. What you were saying is that, like, all the stuff that I do behind the scenes, like, I mean, you guys could see it on my website and I could talk about it and all that stuff, but that's not the whole point of the work. Is the point of the work is like the movie or the TV show or the game. And yeah, I mean, you guys get to see all these like beautiful pieces in art books and in presentations like this one where you guys are seeing like Vincenzo doing all these like killer renders, but for most part, we're highlighting well, we're serving the function of the project. Versus if you're an illustrator, like your piece is the project. You're an illustrator, you're making illustrations. Your work is the final product. We're helping design that final product in whatever form it may be.
Yeah. Image. Then you just change the canvas size. We're going to add a little bit more height to it, just so we have that little black matting that you normally will see for final film shots. I'm just going to move that over here. And that's basically it from start to finish. There we go. Yay, we're done. No. And so again, as you can kind of see through this whole entire demo, we've utilized a lot of different techniques and a lot of different software to help get this. And the best part about this is that it's a very time efficient way to work. You can do literally dozens of these in a day if you become fast and efficient enough at using this workflow. And it will allow you to spend more time designing and less time trying to figure out fundamentals. So this is something that I highly recommend any of you that want to get into conceptual art, especially within filming video games, to at least pick up and try out, because it is going to be part of the future and how we work as in Aletta's condition, of the way she's working and how I do my work as well.
Yeah, thank you guys for having us. I mean, honestly, hopefully you guys were entertained. I mean, I'm always learning from these types of experiences too. Like when I look at Vincenzo's work, I'm like, oh my God, dude.
Thank you very
That's
much.
the benefit of being an artist. Seriously, like, you know, like when you guys are stuck, like remember that there's, you know, all of you guys are sources of inspiration to each other. And you guys too, like honestly, like my students, when they're killing it, you're just like, oh my God, that's amazing. And we get pumped up.
Yeah, we get, as teachers, we get very inspired to see you guys also feel passionate about your work and see you guys learn and push yourselves. It's very, very fulfilling for us as teachers.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting. And I always tell my students, like, you know what, you're doing all this stuff as a student now. There is no telling that in the next month, you're going to like see me in the studio, be like, oh my God, here you are. And thumbs up, man. We're always glad to see that happen. Like, we're always wanting to be inspired too.
Yeah, no, totally, totally. Cool. So let's just wrap this up. Thank you guys for attending. It was really great showing you guys my workflow here and kind of showing you a little bit of an introduction, how to do the concept art for film and video games. I hope you enjoyed yourself.
Thank you guys so much for being here tonight and taking your time to put this on. I mean, the artwork is amazing. I just think that the stories are great too, just of the hard work and pushing yourselves for your careers to get to where you're at. And I always try to emphasize that to the students that are out there that are thinking like, is this a career that I should pursue? Is this something that can be real? You know, I do this pretty much every Tuesday, different faculty, different story, but the common thread is always just working and being passionate and being dedicated to this. And, you know, and that's pretty much what the school is all about. And I try to tell students that if you're in that situation where you find yourself at a crossroads of what do, I always tell people, do something that you're passionate about. You know, Aletta had, what you mentioned was being somebody that was always into video games and being a gamer. And that was something that you really loved to do, and finding a way to be associated with that for your career, I think is something that's it's inspiring for people to follow their dreams and to put in the hard work and put the, another one of the faculty members kept saying, you got to put in the miles. That's what he kept saying. And it always associates with me of just saying, no matter what it is you're going to do, if you want to have a successful career, you have to put in the work and you have to put in the miles, and that's how you get there. So for any students that are out there, I just want to go ahead and throw some links in there. Procedurally, the way that our school works is we have people that work with you one-on-one, and the first step really is just to have a conversation with you. So if there's anybody out there that's interested in just learning more about the school or how do I join the academy, our semester is coming up here just around the corner, but there's still time to get started here this fall. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're interested in learning more about a particular major, whether that be undergrad, graduate degrees, even if you're in high school and you're looking at the pre-college program, we have a team available to just sit down and have a one-on-one with you to give you some advice on what it is that you can get started with. So I would just ask you, the first thing you can do is just send me a quick email. I'll be more than happy to respond. What we can do is try to just set up a time for you to have a one-on-one, and we can do something more consultative where we get to know more about what you want to do, what your goals are, what kind of things you're interested in, and try to at least give you the advice of what majors or career paths we can help you to get on. So please don't be shy. I have a wonderful team that's willing to sit down and work with you all one-on-one before you take any steps forward. If there's anybody out there that would like to apply to the university, I'm going to put the link in here. But if you'd like to have a conversation first to clear some things up, more than happy to do that as well. So please don't be shy to shoot me an email. Be more than happy to help everybody out there. So I'll go ahead and say goodnight to everybody. Once again in the chat, if you want to say thank you to Elena or Vincenzo for their time tonight, please do so. And we'll go ahead and wrap up this event tonight, and I'll hang back in the chat to answer any last minute questions. So be safe out there, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and I hope to see some of you back here soon. Take care.
Yeah, everybody.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Stay safe.